Hey everybody, this is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com here in San Diego, California. So this is another retro review of a ultra elusive Vespa that was only sold 1 year in the United States. So the Vespa P200E and the P125X, which is featured right behind me, it's the customer's P200 back here, they were imported to the United States from 1977 to 1981. And then they also had another importer for a very short period that did a PX150 in 1985. There's very few of those. But the vast majority of the P-range vintage shifting scooter, Vespa scooter here in the United States are just like the ones behind me, the P200 and P125X, imported in the late 70s and early 80s. Well, Piaggio USA, they formed in 2001. They started out with the Vespa ET4 and the ET2, which are automatic twist and go scooters. All along these times, you know, all in the 2000s, they've always had a shifting 4-speed Vespa. The 200s, I think those were kind of discontinued by the late 2000s, 2007, somewhere in there. But the PX150, PX125, which is one of our most popular videos, is the Mexico imported PX150, which happens to be the very last of the original Vespa shifting two-stroke scooters. And you can see that video, you can see the little tag. I think that video's got nearly 1 million views at this point. But I wanted to cover the one that was officially imported to the United States in 2005 only. So this green PX150 belongs to one of our customers. It originally belonged to the sales manager at Vespa Motorsport, TC, and he sold it several years ago. They only imported about 500 of these. They all had a little badge. I'll show you a little bit later when I go over it. The vast majority of them were in this green color, which is the same color that the GT200 was in, kind of a classic green. Also came in black, silver, I think red and white. No, maybe I think it was just black and silver. I should have looked that up before I started this video. The one to the right, I'll talk about that. That belongs to the employee of Vespa Motorsport, Kevin, and it has a story of its own. So, just like the European PX125, pretty much the Millennium Edition, which had electric start, kind of an updated speedometer that I'll show you. Pretty much the same speedometer is found on the Vespa GTV 300, ironically. Disc brake front end, electric start, fuel gauge, a couple other things like lock and cowls. Not much different than the P series scooter that they were importing in the United States in the late 70s and early 2000s. So this came in the United States as a 150cc only model. And there's many dealers that had them all the way up to about 2007, 2008. There's still ones that were available new from what I remember. And one thing about this scooter, it was too cool for California. Never imported to California because California has a different set of emissions laws that govern two-wheelers and four-wheelers. Ironically now, I think there's 11 or 14 or 13 states that follow the California emissions rules. I think it's for a good thing. Come on, cars and stuff like that, we don't need more pollution in this world. But these two-stroke motors, even with a catalytic converter, they weren't clean enough for California back in 2005. But fortunately, there's ways that import them into California once they're used. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it is possible to do that, and several of them ended up in California because California is a very popular market for scooters. Especially big metros like San Francisco, LA, and San Diego to a smaller extent. But it's a pretty cool scooter. This is a very clean original. Unfortunately, somebody took off the reflectors. It originally would have had amber reflectors. I'll show you one other unique quirk of this scooter. This headlight is extra bulging. I don't know what it is. The original European PX has a lens that sticks out about half this much, but the US specific one sticks out like pretty much an inch. It's like looks like a dome popping out of here. So kind of a different, unique little quirk that was only found on the US market once. So the 2005 PX, it had a unique set of switches here. They have this kill switch that allows you to turn the motor off. European ones never had that. It's a little different than most American turn signals. It's on your right side. You got your electric start button, and there's that speedometer. That's pretty much the same speedometer as used on the brand new GTV Sejorni. You know, they use that exact same speedo. It's just like a classic speedometer that they introduced in around 2001. I think the Millennium Edition Vespa PX is where that speedometer came from. Before that, it was just a black face speedo with like green and amber in it. A unique thing that's found on the all the American ones is, unfortunately, most of them have rubbed away. You can see a little bit. It says PX150 Series America, and they were limited edition. It has it engraved. This is a very low model. This is 25 of 500. And I'll show you Kevin's. Ironically, it's almost one of the last ones that was imported. It's got the classic rubber strips, as all shifting Vespas have had ever since they've been around. You got the generous sized glove box. It's got these emissions control labels. Nothing about California, because you would have a different set of emissions. But that's something that you never see on a European one. The locks are pretty much the same key for all the locks. And you can lock the column with the same ignition key. The P200Es back in the late 70s, early 80s, P125Xs, they did not have. They had separate keys for the ignition, the column, the glove box sometimes, and even the seat. But these, they were able to standardize the key across the whole entire range. So they had this brown kind of seat. This seat's in remarkably nice condition. Some of these scooters have been well used. And you have your fuel and oil tank right under here, and you have the pair locks that lock your cowls. Performance-wise, they're rather lackluster in performance, but being a two-stroke motor, they can be easily hopped up. And I'll tell you, both of these have been heavily hopped up. Well, this one, not so much. It's got a rejet and a better pipe on it. Originally, they had a catalyzed pipe that kind of limited them. So I'll start it up. You can hear what it sounds like. It's got the manual fuel control, as all shifting Vespas have had. With the exception of the Koza and some of the PKs, they did have some automatic ones and some of the oddball scooters. Comes right to live. And it's a little bit louder than a stock bike. Kind of has like a popcorn sound with that Cedo Plus pipe. A DC horn that runs off the battery. And the indicators. Before you shut it down, you want to manually turn off your fuel and turn the key off. And it shifts through the gears, 4-speed, if you're not familiar with a manual shifting Vespa. Just like any other Vespa, Vespa Sprint, Rally. Feels pretty much the same, but the Ps do have kind of a nice feel. You can get all the parts for these very readily. They keep them on the road. Now it's a 2005, you got to keep in mind this thing's over 15 years old now that we're in 2021. So it's now an old scooter as well, even though it was the very last of officially imported Vespa manual shifting scooters. So here's Kevin's PX Series America. His is number 193 of 500. So it's kind of right in the middle of the production run. It's got a unique story. It showed up to the shop pretty much burned down. It was up against a building, and I think the building had a building fire, so it was a green one just like that, if I recall. And a lot of the paint was burnt off of it, and parts were burnt off of it. He painstakingly restored the scooter, and it has a 200cc motor in it. He did a complete motor swap. But for the most part, you can see it kind of carries over many of the parts. He put a better LED headlight. Has the smoothed out fender without the fender crest. Just a couple little changes otherwise. You know, he's running, I think, a Kenda tire on there and the Malosi shock. But the big thing is he's got the upgraded motor in there set up for a touring setup. He's ridden the scooter cross country. Was at a Vespa back in 2018, I think it was, 2019, I don't remember which one he was at. But he's definitely taken it around. It's pretty cool that something from 2005 has already been restored, and you can see he's done it in a custom kind of, what would you call this color? Actually, this color is a Vespa color. It's a 2019 Vespa GTS 300 color. Only had it for 2019, and that was it. So that's what the color was copied from. Performance-wise, it's pretty lackluster in their stock form. A Vespa ET4 150 or LX 150, Primavera certainly, or a Sprint will completely outperform these scooters. They have a top speed of definitely somewhere in between 55 and 60 miles per hour. But the benefit of being a two-stroke motor, you can heavily modify them. Kevin's probably makes double the horsepower of what the stock original PX150. Probably made like 7 or 8. His is making probably 14 or 15, which is a perfect touring setup, easily capable of going down the highway about 70 miles an hour without any problems. Still running the 350 10 tires, and they are tube type. The rims split, so they're pretty easy to service. They do have a spare tire on the left side, as many or pretty much all the P series have always had, or had the accommodation to put a spare tire in there. But pretty much this was the last of a generation. And, you know, for the United States, this is the end of the road for the shifting for two-stroke Vespa. So maybe you're interested in purchasing one of these scooters. Well, you do like a countrywide search for PX150s for sale, and the price ranges greatly. For something that's turnkey and low miles, such as something like this, you could be expecting to pay over $3,500, probably closer to $400 or $4,500 for something that's very clean and all original and low miles and in perfect service, ready to go condition. You can certainly buy a couple that are out there that are basket cases and need work. Maybe you can get one for a bargain, like 500 bucks, but probably not likely. You may still have to pay like $1,000 or something. Keep in mind, just like a vintage bike, that's something like behind me, if it's got motor problems or high miles, you may need to completely go through the motor. You may need to go through the fuel system if it's been sitting, fuel lines, all that stuff deteriorate. And if it's left outside, you know, the rubber parts and the paint finishes probably will be deteriorated as well. Thanks for watching. And if you're curious on the very last PX that was ever pretty much produced, or the very last of the run of them, 2017, 2016, check out that red PX video that we did several years ago. Thanks again for watching. Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. And if you're looking to fix one of these up or looking to accessorize one, we still got you covered here at ScooterWest.com. Check out our website and consider subscribing if you haven't. Thanks again.